I'm over here listening to this Alan West clip, Young Americans Foundation, and this young white man stands up in the audience, and he's basically talking about they were talking about police, police brutality and all that stuff, but he was bringing up things being institutionalized, and then the thing is like it's Alan West brings. I understand his political affiliation, but he brings up a point, and this is what a lot of people do, especially people who are already compromised. And I see Alan West as somebody who's already compromised because he has to appeal to his, political masters and the people who fund him, and that's why we never get an honest dialogue about any of these topics. But he brings up, choices and how he grew up in the 60s. And, the main difference was that in the 60s versus today, that we don't have fathers in the home and we need more fathers in the home. And then he just like kind of like leaves it at that. And I'm like, we don't have fathers in the home because you don't have fathers that are gainfully employed. Everything that he said about the Great Society and LBJ and the welfare state and everything, yeah, that's true, but that's only part of it. Like I always say, let's go through the other policies: the redlining, the blockbusting, the denial of FHA loans, the dumping of drugs in the black community, the convict leasing, the eminent domain, the urban renewal. Let's go through those things. It's not just a matter of, the welfare state came in the room and just destroyed everything. It was a piece of the institutionalized white supremacy. It was a piece of that has negatively affected the black community. But then he goes on to sit there and say that it's all about a choice, despite the fact that you're in a bad environment. What I notice is this: when it comes to white people understand collective conditioning, right? They understand that if most white men are out of work, or if they understand that if something happens majorly in the economy that's going to affect most white households, that community is going to go to shit. They understand that when you see these guys negotiating with unions and shit, or the unions negotiating with the big companies and stuff like that, they always talk in that language. We have men with families. Like all of a sudden it becomes about families. All of a sudden it becomes about a family wage, not a livable wage, a family wage. You see, so what I notice is when it comes to white people, and when they argue about, they have a resource argument with the powers that be, right? They talk about the social conditioning of you need to have a critical mass of people that are in this position in order to have the majority culture of that community to be a particular way, which requires resources. But then when it comes to the black community, there's always this talking point as though you can have a black community that lacks resources, and then it's all about choice. Again, the whole attitude is we don't want to have to do anything that fixes the black community and all the terrible stuff that we've done. We don't know. We're going to say it's about personal responsibility. It's about choice. It's not about resources, right? And then we're going to sit up in here. We're going to pretend like most people that are put into a fucked up situation are going to be able to get themselves out via sheer willpower, which is bullshit, because white people do not operate that way when it comes to their own shit. They don't. They recognize that whole critical mass thing. They recognize if the plant shuts down, the community's going to go to shit. But for black people, if the plant shuts down, it's all about, they took Christ out of the schools. Like, what does that have to do with the tea in China? It's about choice. And you know how I know that the white people are full of shit when it comes to this point? Because of the way that they move when it comes to when they're about to start a family and the environments that they choose to raise their family in. If environment is not the main factor, then why is it that white people go out of their way to see to it that their children are in environments where they're not affected by negativity in the environment? Oh no, honey, we can't move here. Oh, why not, honey? Well, look around. There's too many homeless people. There's too many drunkards. There's too many alcoholics. There's too much crime. The schools are shitty. And what do white people do? They take their resources and they go to another environment that is sustained by a higher quality of resources so that they can, have what they want. They don't want their children negatively affected by shit. If it's all about personal responsibility and personal choice, then they should be able to raise a child in the middle of the goddamn Gaza Strip and then come out and that child be and maintain the level of success that, many of these white people have. They should be able to raise their child in any environment, any dilapidated Appalachia in freaking, in Kentucky. They should be able to go to the poorest parts of America, and all of those white people should be successful. But what do we see? We see that when the environment is fucked up, most of the people in that situation, the overwhelming majority, will be fucked up. They will come out of that situation, messed up. And then that's the other thing. When you put people in a particular situation, there's no way for them to come out. It's a negative situation. There's no way for them to come out unscathed, unscarred. There is going to be some damage there, which is the very thing that white parents who live in the suburbs and nicer neighborhoods, they see to it that their kids are not affected by it. You got to be blind to think that when white people decide that they're going to purchase a home in a particular area, that they're not taking environment into account. Curb appeal, resale price, freaking the schools, the safety, the police department, everything, local facilities, right? All of that, which you can see based off of, again, going back to the curb appeal. Because when a community is maintained, it looks nice, it looks clean, it looks prestige. But all of that costs money. I said prestige, pristine. All of that costs money. And you always get these I made it out Negroes like Alan West that love to go up there and I'm a special Negro and say people, they could be just like me. It's all about choice. It's all about choice. And you know what the real message to all of that is? The real message to all of that is we have this gross inequality in America that came from the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, right? And we're not going to correct that. It's all about personal responsibility. We're going to act like all of those things aren't a factor. We're going to act and pretend like the white middle class wasn't created by FDR and the New Deal and freaking the Homestead Act or FHA loans, and those 30-year mortgages that veterans were able to get when they came back from World War II. You know what I mean? It was like the perfect combination of things that created the white middle class. You go back to the 1890s and whatnot, you didn't have a white middle class like that. You had child labor laws, 40-hour work weeks, paid holiday, full medical, all that shit was fought for. It was not given, it was fought for. When you see those pictures of those little white kids with coal all over their face, fought for. It was only the result of, we got a whole bunch of young men who were fighting World War II, coming back, and they need housing. What are we going to do? See, America's very quick to recognize, again, white people outnumbering black people 5-1, being the overwhelming majority of this country. They can't have the majority of white men fail. If white men start failing, you know what you get? You get January 6th storming the Capitol. That's what you get when white men start failing. Okay? But see, again, I keep talking about how white men get caught up in their own bullshit of personal responsibility, this, that, and the third, right? And they do the very thing that the government would rather prefer is they off themselves or they fall into drugs or something like that. Because then at that point, the government doesn't have to address your problems. Oh, but they sure as shit addressed the shit after World War II when they decided to give Mr. Levitt all those government. They never had that before. We're going to build 1,500 housing units and we don't even have any buyers. That was backed by the government. And white people were able to pay $10,000 for a home, have a 30-year mortgage, get all of the equity over time, for that, and then pass that on to their children and their grandchildren to be able to take out equity of the home to go and, renovate the property, start a small business, send their kids to college, all that shit. That is what black people, black African Americans were denied. And that was white affirmative action. That was specific to white people. All that shit, the racial housing covenants, the denial of the FHA loans, that's just that alone. That doesn't even go into the other bullshit. And so with that is why you have today's white middle class. Because of their grandfather. I mean, many people, if you really talk to a lot of white people, their family really, as a white middle class person, it really kicked off with their grandfather. My grandfather, he was in the war. He came back and he bought a house in Ohio and worked in the plant for the next 35 years. Sent my dad to college. My dad went to college. He majored in finance. And then now he's, some big guy on Wall Street living in Manhattan. That's how that shit went down. They can't tell you. They don't go back and try to brag about the 1890s and the 1900s and shit. Hell, the crazy thing is most of them weren't even here. But African Americans been here longer than they've been here. Most of them weren't even here. If a dude got a Irish last name, you came here with the potato famine. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you're less American than many African Americans, but let these Irish boys tell you they're so American. Just because, they're white, and once that idea and concept of whiteness took over, then you ended up with, the people who were frowned upon immigrants that showed up, that all of a sudden now, because they share that white skin and they can pass as white, that's what they did. Same thing I said about, when Ben Shapiro went up there talking his dumb shit. And I'm like, says the man whose people changed their last name so that they could get over in America, but you want to talk about how the system of white supremacy doesn't work, but y'all over there changing your last names. Kirk Douglas's last name is not Kirk Douglas. His last name was Daniel Dembski. That's what his name was. And changed the name along with a whole bunch of other actors, including Stan Lee. Whole bunch of other actors of that era changed their last names. Why would you change your last name if there's no such thing as the system of white supremacy? Why would you feel the need to cover up your Jewish last name? As Martin Luther King pointed out, unlike Jewish people, black people can't just change our last name and be considered white in America. This, and I'm pointing at my hand, does not come off. You know what I mean? So you get these people that go up there and they spew nonsense, including other black people who are, the special Negroes, the little pet Negroes that they pat on the head and say, oh, go out there and talk all those Candace Owens talking points. That's another reason why you see a lot of black people that don't gravitate towards the Republican Party. Because the Republican Party does not address black issues. It tries to bury them. It tries to make it like, oh, it's just personal responsibility. Oh, there were no policies that were specifically designed to benefit white people and disadvantage black people. And if that's going to be corrected, it's going to be corrected with having policies that are specifically benefit black people. Whether you want to talk about reparations for slavery or whether you want to talk about coming up with some new policies that specifically target and benefit black people over other groups. And that's what nobody wants to have a conversation about. Oh, that's so unfair. Oh, that's so unfair. The first fucking 150 years of after black people were freaking freed was unfair. You know what I'm saying? Like get the fuck out of here about what's unfair. You know what I mean? Oh, like as though we can just wash all that away and that happened and everything and we can just go from here. No, you're going to correct all of that shit. And I'm saying, people will say, well, they're not going to do it. Even if they're not going to do it, they're not going to get away with the idea that it doesn't need to be done. Fuck that. They're not going to get away with the idea that there wasn't and still continues to be this injustice that is not being addressed. So when I see all the crime and the poverty and the inner city and all that stuff going on, when it spills into the white community, I don't care. I'm like, y'all created this shit. You created this monster. This is stage 4 cancer that you could have dealt with before, but you didn't deal with it. And one of the things that I wanted to say, and it pisses me off, is, what really angers me about white people, white supremacy does everything half-ass. You know what I mean? You enslave a bunch of people for, 350 years, whatever. You enslave them, and when slavery's over, you don't send them back to Africa, right? You keep them here. Then you have them, again, lower rung of society, right? It's like, damn, in other words, send them back or fully incorporate them into the society. Point blank, period. One or the other. And it's just like, just everything else. It's like if you're going to fix the problem, then fix it. If you're not, then don't fix it and deal with the consequences. But don't half-ass it. It's like they're like fence straddlers. They don't want to actually deal with the actual issue. They just let it fester and create more problems. And then it gets too big, and then they can't handle it, and then they want to argue that it's too big to solve, right? I'm like, you should never let it get this big. And they keep kicking the can down the road, kicking the can down, on their grandkids, on their white great-grandchildren. That's all white people do. They kick the can down the road. They just keep kicking it down the road. And then shit gets worse and worse and worse. And then you end up with smash and grab and all this other stuff that you're seeing, right? Because they think they can just simply close their eyes and ignore this growing issue. They half-ass it all the time. They did the same shit with the damn, all this shit we got to deal with, the war on terror and everything. Again, had you done what Charlie Wilson said in the movie with Tom Hanks and shit and built a fucking school, when he said, hey, half the country is under the age of 14, we need to do something. You know what I mean? But what did they do? They said, nah, we contain communism, right? And then the Mujahideen, turned into Al-Qaeda. Same shit in Iraq. Yes, we took out Saddam because we wanted his oil. Okay. And then Saddam, who was keeping everybody in check, right? They did the same thing in the 80s with the black kingpins and shit. All the gangs that you see now are fractured, from all those brothers that got RICO charges back in the 80s. They were keeping shit in check. You couldn't just take somebody out. You had to get permission. You couldn't just go out there and just do whatever. Right? There was a structure. And once there's no structure, once you cut the head off the Hydra, then it pops up a whole bunch of other heads. And that's what happened with Saddam. And that's why you have, what group is that? They were the I think a part of the Imperial Guard or whatever going on in Iraq and in Syria. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me, not Al-Qaeda. That's Al-Qaeda. But then you got the Taliban that was in, Afghanistan. And I'm like, yeah, like freaking the Mujahideen turned into the Taliban, and then the freaking the Iraqi shit with Saddam turned into Al-Qaeda. If I'm getting it straight, half-assing the shit. Again, I look at Israel. I say the same thing. I'm like, okay, you got these people in the Gaza Strip. They living in there, poor, impoverished, all that other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, you think that they're just going to exist like that and you're not going to catch any smoke. I'm like, okay, you keep thinking that. And the same thing in America. I'm like, you think that you're just going to keep having black people live in these conditions of perpetual poverty and that the shit's not going to spill onto you? Like, it's insanity. You know what I mean? It's like, deal with the problem. You want to be pissed off at anybody? Be pissed off at your fucking grandparents and great grandparents. Like, y'all motherfuckers really fucking left us holding the bag. God damn it. That's who you should be mad at. To the white folks. Nah, but they mad at everybody else. They mad at the victims of their bullshit. It's like when I see these people talking about, oh, build a wall and these Mexicans coming across the border. Why don't you dig in the ass of the white dude pulling up at Home Depot at 6 o'clock in the morning with the F-350 truck, hiring some Mexicans to go do some construction work because he doesn't want to pay Americans, other white Americans, $15 or $20 an hour. Why don't you go bring all that smoke that you bring to the Mexicans to him? But y'all don't do that. Why don't you go and create some laws that check that white dude in that truck that does all the hiring of all the Mexicans? Why don't you create some laws about that shit? No, but they don't do that shit. They go and they blame the Mexican who's trying to make a living, who's trying to make $1, who's trying to send money back to Mexico and help his family out. They blame him. It's the funniest shit in the world. You know, they look at the black people. Oh, black people, y'all don't want to work. Y'all don't want to work. Y'all breathing up all the white man's oxygen with your flared African nostrils. Then they go over to the Mexicans. Oh, y'all working too much. Y'all driving our wages down. Like seriously, like what the fuck? Make up your mind. You're driving our wages down. We got to build a wall. Black people not working. Oh, they need to work. They're lazy. Again, coming from the same people whose ancestors went and grabbed us off of our continent so that they wouldn't have to work. Anyway, that's all I got to say. That's my video. SWP out.